Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Hunter Talks to People. My name is Hunter, and today, by the time you're watching this, will be episode 3. We have Mr. Ed Bolian here. It's an absolute pleasure. Former Lamborghini salesman, founder of VINwiki, and one of the 3 hosts on Car Trek. Season 5 just came out yesterday. As of recording, Ed, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
So I wanted to start off by kind of addressing the point that you've got a whole YouTube channel where anybody can kind of find anything about you and as far as your car stuff goes. So I don't want you to have to, recount your life story. But can you tell me a little bit how this kind of crazy life that you have as far as getting in contact with so many cool cars, not even to mention the F1 that you just drove, but how did that become from just an interest to now your career?
Sure. So, my whole life with respect to cars has really been about finding interesting and unorthodox ways to get access to them. And so in college, I started an exotic car rental company, and then I became the director of sales for Lamborghini Atlanta. And then I started the app VINwiki that allows people to really document the stories of their cars. And in each of those kind of chapters of my career, it's always been about finding a different angle of what can be done really to enrich that experience that we have, whether it is renting a Lamborghini for the weekend or whether it's finding the best deal or the best financing arrangement so somebody could actually buy one, or if it's really just figuring out what it is about that particular car drilled all the way down to its VIN that makes you fall in love with it. And I'm honored and privileged that we've been able to find all these different ways to do that. And then I've been able to meet so many amazing people through it that have started to give me those opportunities that I never could have otherwise. And I think Car Trek is really the most representative of that. And the experiences that we've had shooting 5 of those series now, we're about to shoot our 6th, has just been, if you had asked me 15 years ago, Ed, what do you want to do? It would be exactly what we do with Car Trek.
Yeah, absolutely. It must be like living a dream, to do Car Trek. And, I remember all the way back in season 1, I still go back and watch the clip with the blue Lamborghini at the gas station. That's still one of my favorite moments in all of Car Trek. But seriously, for anybody watching this who hasn't seen the series, I can't recommend it enough. So you said that you're filming for 6 in October, the end of this year?
Yeah, so we're shooting it actually the end of September into the beginning of October, and then we'll run that just before Christmas. That's the goal.
Nice. Is there anything that, obviously I'm not 100% sure what goes on the creative. Is there anything you've wanted to do on a Car Trek that maybe Tyler or Freddie have been like, I don't know, Ed, or is there anything that you're hoping to do to accomplish in a future Car Trek?
We've explored so many different concepts, and fortunately Autotemp is the sponsor of that, gives us a lot of leeway in terms of the premises that we want to do. Most of the time it really is a premise that ends up revolving around one of the cars that we end up finding. And so like for Car Trek 1, the fact that I was able to buy a manual transmission Gallardo for the price of a C8 sort of steered the nature of challenge, right? And so it's a little bit of a chicken egg problem. And so in the same way, the Vanquish was sort of that for Car Trek 2. But I just bought a car today, whimsically. Somebody called me on it and I didn't even know it was possible yet. And so that may become the Car Trek 7 premise.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so we're always kicking ideas around, but so there's nothing that I've really wanted to do that we haven't. I pushed hard for a more off-roading focused series for this year. We weren't really sure how much harder it would be to capture, quite honestly. So we're going to dabble in that a little bit on Car Trek 6, and so I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and that'll probably dictate whether or not we do that in Car Trek 8. But it's like you said, it is a dream. And I think we're stewards of our audience's attention. And I try to keep that in mind rather than we're so interesting that they can't help but watch. No, they are giving us their time. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we give them the best possible content that we can. And fortunately, I'm at a point where, from a VINwiki Car Stories perspective, there's lines of guests that want to come in and talk. And I will continue to capture that, make sure that we can immortalize the best stories that we can. But I think that the audience attention and the opportunity for content creation and the sponsor relationships that allow us to really up the game and push the envelope there. I think that means that it's our responsibility to do things like Car Trek, whatever it is, as a bigger picture, higher production quality, collaborative opportunity that we possibly can. And that's what I'm proud of, is that I think it's the right thing for us to be doing. And it also happens to be exactly what I want to do. And so it's nice when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you put in a good way there, especially mentioning how kind of the car can determine the story a lot of the times. I thought that was good. Speaking of cars, because we could sit here forever and talk about cars, but I want to kind of talk about cars in a sense of achievement, or almost obtainable assets in a sense. I've loved cars since I was young. I have an uncle who is buying one every 2 months with the wife's permission, and always swapping something out. And I kind of got that bug a little bit. To me, I like looking up at the ladder above me, right, of the next obtainable car. What can work in my budget? What's practical? What can I actually use? What can I actually garage? So you at Lamborghini got to see that next rung come true for a lot of people. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's honestly the best part of the job, right? I mean, so helping people to figure out what the right car is, because we sold a lot of stuff. We were an authorized dealer for Lamborghini, McLaren, Aston Martin, Lotus, and we had access to every kind of used, interesting car possible. And so trying to figure out exactly like what car actually does fit somebody, because selling cars in the late 2000s and the 20 teens was very different than 10 years prior, where you pretty much just had an SL55, a 360, or a 911 turbo. And those are great cars, wonderful options, but those really, the availability steered what you could actually buy. Whereas I got to enjoy kind of a window where there were choices, and it was an explosion of production. And I do like that. And I think as you view ownership in that way, you look, all right, well, what is the real goal car? What's the realistic goal car? And what's the right now opportunity? And how do I skip steps? How do I find shortcuts? How do I finance more strategically? How do I avoid depreciation in the short term? And all of those problems, I just absolutely love solving.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I watched that video when you talked to Premier, and how they kind of made stuff work for people, and that's obtainable for me, obviously, and that's how it should be for everybody, right? Some sort of obtainable way, to kind of get into the next car.
So what's your dream car?
Dream car is a gated manual Gallardo. That would be totally it. Probably, I don't, the years better than I do as far as what's good, but like an 06, that'd be total top of the rung, top of the ladder dream car.
Perfect. Yeah, nothing at all wrong with that. The 04s to 08s are all the first gen cars. The Spider started in 06. That's what I have. And it's a car you will own the rest of your life for free. And I think that's what I love, is that you'll spend a little bit of money maintaining it, not a lot. They're quite honestly bulletproof cars, but whatever you do have to spend, it will be offset by the appreciation that the cars have due to their rarity. There's about 300 US cars. They're findable, they're buyable, give or take $100,000. Can't do any better.
Yeah, no, I'm guilty of searching them many times over on Auto Tempest, seeing what's out there. But one day when the money's there. So like I've talked with my guests in the past, I like to talk about kind of a social media presence, online presence. Yours is huge, everything from the Instagram to YouTube, whether it's VINwiki or Car Trek. Did you, when you started that, ever imagine getting to this level?
Never, not at all. I mean, I got a little bit of a social media following after we set the Cannonball record back in 2013. And so that was really my first kind of experience. And quite honestly, I just used Instagram as a way to show off the cars that I'd sold, mostly so I could remember when I'd sold them and know who to go chasing when I needed to trade them back in order to sell them to somebody else. And it was very effective for that. But I didn't have any like aspirations of a personal following that I would ever monetize or anything like that whatsoever. And then when we started VINwiki as an app, we knew we needed to have a social media presence, but we weren't really thinking about it in terms of like, how are we going to make money off of social media? Like, you have a small tech company, you want to grow it by way of whatever free exposure you could get off of social media. And so after a year or so, we had about 5,000 users in the app, which is like a crowdsourced vehicle history reporting platform, kind of like a social version of Carfax. People post information to any car by its VIN or by its license plate. And so the users we had got it, they loved it, they used it. But you think you're going to tap that first domino and a butterfly is going to flap its wings in Kansas and suddenly the whole world's going to use your app. And that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
It might feel like that because you get the exposure from the millionth daily active user and then everybody the next week knows about it. But that's not how it goes for the first few years. And so when we started the YouTube channel a year in, it was actually because I wanted to just give content to other YouTubers and let them run it on their channels to get their audience's attention, never expecting to monetize it. And they all said no. Mm-hmm. So, I knew a lot of automotive YouTubers and we'd had some success in letting them test drive my cars and then make videos. And that had just kind of, been what we'd done. And it had worked. So I knew YouTube as an automotive audience translated to app downloads, but I had no idea that it would ever become our thing.
Absolutely. And, the cool thing is I think you guys, especially you and the other two hosts, are in a really cool niche of the car YouTuber. I mean, because you have somebody like Doug, right? Who's, Doug Demure for the non-car people out there, who is just doing flat out reviews of cars, right? Like he posts them and if you want to see what the newest thing is, what the newest fully loaded Telluride is, he'll tell you. And I think that's really cool. But, kind of the car adventures, I think that's your guys' corner of the market, which is really, really cool. So I just want to talk briefly about VINwiki. As you mentioned earlier, you have no shortage of people who want to come and share their stories. Is there a clamor for all of the repeat guests, the people who are like Rabbit, who are great storytellers? Is there a clamor you generally see for those people to keep coming back again and again?
There is, and quite candidly, or not so much, we film them at my house. And originally we shot them in a warehouse that I had, and when commercial real estate went crazy, they tried to triple my rent, and so I moved it into a house that I bought with a big enough garage and stuff like that. And so I'm a little bit more vetting in terms of how careful I need to be in letting weirdos come to my house, even if they have great stories. And so I'll probably go back to a remote shooting location at some point in the next year or two to be able to do more of that, because they're great stories and they're worth listening to, but the people I want near my kids. And so I think, right now we've leaned more into repeat guests that I know are great guys and have great stories and are really good at telling them. And that's been a bit of the reality. But it's, we've also had to steer through COVID and try to figure out what's okay in terms of, which is a moving target. And so it's been a very interesting model, but there was a logic to it, and it's worked out. And I'm glad that so many guys like Rabbit and Casey and Doug Tabbitt and all these guys that have come on and told a bunch of stories, that they have developed such a great relationship with our audience and built their own audiences and grown their own social media following and stuff like that. Because, as I'm sure you're talking to a lot of different social media people, it all comes down to collaboration. Yeah. And your growth will come from the relationships that you build with other content creators that are bigger, smaller, different, the same, all the things that you do. And it is not just about the content you produce. It's about the way that you introduce it to the world and the way people help you do that.
Absolutely. Well, that's really sound advice. And I hope that I'm doing that somewhat by talking to you. It's interesting, I think, to see the direction everything's going, not just in the YouTube world, but I think in the car world too. So that leads me to the inevitable question that you've probably answered more than you'd like. But the electric question. I mean, there's a lot of hype from manufacturers and a lot of different stories that the US will go all electric by X year, by 20XX. One, do you think that's true? Do you think it's sustainable? Do you think it's going to happen? Is everybody going to switch over to electric? And two, do you like it?
I mean, there's a lot to love about electric cars and electrification. Do I like it? No, it's not the kind of car that I want to drive. It's not the things that I love about cars, the things that made me fall in love with cars. But that being said, there's huge advantages. I get in my golf cart to go to the neighborhood pool rather than my car because it's an electric thing. It feels like less of an event to get in. I know that I'm not going to foul the spark plugs by just driving it for 45 seconds. And so I like a lot of things about it, but I don't get in the golf cart for fun.
Yeah.
And so I like that, when I start a car, I don't know if it's going to work the way I want it to, because it's a, high mileage example of a, highly strung Italian car.
Yeah.
Uh, but that being said, people are loving cars in different ways now, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. I always found it a little bit exhausting when I was dreaming of different cars for
Mhm.
better ones to come out.
Yeah.
Because as car guys, we want to know what the target is,
Yeah.
but it's a moving target, right? They make new ones every year. They're faster. And you have
Uh-huh.
to kind of decide, well, when does that trade-off between faster and better
Yeah.
actually sacrifice the thing that I really wanted? And that's
Yeah.
why I fell in love with the Lamborghini Murcielago. So the car they made in the 2000s, I like better than the Aventador they made, because we gave up manual transmissions. We added a lot of unreliable technologies. We added a lot of risk in terms of long-term maintenance costs. We doubled or more production. And so it was a brilliant car. It was a better car by every evaluative metric, but it wasn't better in terms of what I dreamt of in terms of owning cars.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me that loves this electrification thing, because I know it doesn't do for me what the supercars of the 2000 to 2015 era do.
Yeah.
And that's fun, because I don't have to worry about one becoming more unobtainable until darn Gordon Murray makes a $3 million car that I have to own, but I don't know how to. And so I think that it's great for it to move. It's great if it's better for society. It's great if they drive themselves. And so I don't have to worry about people crashing into my children. But at the same time, it's not why I love cars. And I think it's going to mean that fewer people love cars the way that we do. And that's okay.
Yeah.
There'll be other things to like.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you daily the Mercy as much as you can?
I do. It being now almost a 15-year-old Italian car, it frequently needs small parts. Like right now, it needs front diff bushings, and they took like 4 months to get in.
Jeez,
So it's not a huge drivability issue, but it's annoying.
Yeah.
Front diff will thud when you stop. And so stuff like that happens. And so right now I have 4 similarly aged exotic cars with the Flood Gallardo, the Scud, and the SLR. And so amongst those, like, usually one of them will be 90+% functional, and that's pretty good for me. So that's about what it takes. And they're all old enough that they're not losing value. And so, yeah, that's how it works. But I don't really have a proper daily driver. That being said, like for the last 2 years, I've spent so much time prepping cars for Car Track that like right now I'm trying to drive the rattiest Porsche that you've ever seen in your life in order to hope that it'll make it to where I need it to go for Car Track 6. And so there's stuff like that happens, which is super duper fun, and I'm happy to do it. But yeah, I don't have cars that normal use would require.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, and you even shared like the repair bill cost for the SLR, and then like the radio stuff that you guys were joking about on Car Trek. So yeah, obviously not cheap to keep. Talking about the kind of fun you can have in electric cars, or why you grew up liking cars. I was a valet in downtown Philly when I was in college, and that was my college job. It's by far the most interesting job I've ever had. You name it, I drove it, with the exception of some super high-end stuff, I drove everything else. And I could fill a book with stories. Please put my name on the list for VINwiki stories, because I've got, a lot of police involved ones and some fake money and fun stuff like that. But I never got into a Tesla. One time we even had a Karma there, and I never got into it and drove it. And beyond accelerating quickly, I'm never like, oh, this is cool. I never said that, because they're cool in the sense that like an iPhone is cool, but an iPhone's not interesting because I have one, you have one. It's not interesting. I can't show it off to my friend and go, look what this thing. Well, my thing can do the same exact thing. And that's how I feel about electric cars. Every time I got into a Tesla, I'm like, this is really cool for what it is, but I don't enjoy this experience as an enthusiast. And I fear that going away. My latest purchase, I traded everything I enrolled all my equity, and now I own a 2019 V8 manual Challenger. awesome car, fun,
Mhm.
but I bought it because I'm like, you know what? Probably like 5 or 6 or 7 years, these are not going to exist. They're not going to sell these new anymore
Correct.
because it gets 10 miles to the gallon. It's not going to work. They're just not going to exist. So I worry. I share the concern that you do that's going to go away. And the reason why we love cars is going to go away. But as you said, there's other stuff that we'll move on to that we'll like just as much. Maybe.
Absolutely. Or yeah, they'll like it in a different way, and that's fine. I mean, I I like the idea of being the old curmudgeon-y, like, oh, we used to love being able to shift our own gears, and yeah, our car's got 4 miles a gallon. That'll be wonderful. I mean, it would be more stories to tell.
Yeah. You kick your feet up by a fire and go on for hours.
That's it. That's it.
No, kind of the last portion I want to talk about regarding cars and kind of displaying them. I love going to car meets. I love seeing $5,000 bills, I like seeing $100,000 bills, but I feel like they're not shared enough with the world. I feel like a lot of people who have the craziest cars, or maybe an old timer who has this crazy hot rod, that doesn't get shared with the world. What's your advice to that? What's the remedy to that? To getting these cars out more so they can build a following, other than, how do we share these crazy things with the world?
It's interesting because in one way, I built an app that's designed to create a following for cars. Like, you can follow a car by its VIN
Yeah.
in VINwiki. And that's important because the information that gets shared from owners, from enthusiasts, from historians, from things like that is a lot more significant on significant cars than
Hmm.
Carfax or AutoCheck data might look. That being said, cars are also so personal that building a car for the world is a very different idea than building a car for you. And that's one of the reasons why I love our current Car Trek series, because each of us, myself, Tyler, and Freddie, we've been able to buy our dream cars. And
Yeah.
that's because of the audience that we have. And we get to sort of talk about the story arc from our first cars to our current cars, and how that was made possible by the audience attention. It was made possible by a social media following. It was made possible by whatever success we've found and whatever credit we've been able to build. And I think that it's a very personal thing. And you could tell me that you don't like my dream car, and it will not change my opinion of it at all.
Yeah.
And whereas I just bought a car today that was one of the most famous cars in Europe for a time,
Mhm.
and now nobody cares about it.
Right.
And I think that it's both perfect in that regard, but also a little bit sad, because a car built the way this car is probably should have been kept by the guy who thought that's what a car ought to be. But that's not how it always works, because we all, like you said, we always have that ladder of what else we're going to own. And
Yeah.
so, it's interesting. I'm not sure that there's an answer as to how we publicize cars. I think documenting cars is the critical part.
Add them to
And
VINwiki.
that's where VINwiki comes in. I mean, that's why we built it, was because as I sold cars, the way I packaged their story is what made someone else get excited about it,
Yeah.
and it worked out well.
Yeah. I added one of the cars I sold to VINwiki, so I hope somebody who buys it up again shares it again, so I can see where it ends up. Is there an unobtainium for you? Minus lesson F1. Is there a hurricane, tornado, flood Sharon out there one day for you? Is that somewhere up in the clouds?
I have been talking about a Chiron that has a really, really bad past recently. I don't know. When I bought the first manual transmission LP640, and when I say bought, a bank and I had an agreement that if I continued to behave and service my loan with them, they would let me have it. And I remember thinking, like, is this it? Like, I love the car, but like, do I no longer have a dream car because I have my car? And there was a real truth to that I, and at that point I had 12 more years of payments before it would be really mine. And I was like, well, am I going to pay 12 years on this car? And I ended up flipping it, making money, and buying the worst example of it from an Iranian terrorist drug dealer. And that was great. And I love that car too. Because for everything I loved about it, it was still the same. It was still a manual transmission V12 Lamborghini. But I've run into that a little bit lately. I'll buy anything weird that pops up and is fun and I can not lose money on or use for a good production. But the dream cars, I mean, I really do want an F1. I don't have a clue how I'm going to buy a $10 or $20 million car. And I'm not really sure that I want to have enough money that would ever be responsible, because it seems to carry with it a lot of other problems I don't want. So I'd like to have a Bugatti. They're great to drive. They're miserable to maintain. Is it worth it? No, probably not. But I feel like I need a goal car out there. I really like the Senna LM that the guys down in Orlando have, but is it enough better than my Scud that it cost a tenth of what it cost? No, probably not. No, certainly not, but maybe it's worth it. So there's not really, other than an F1 and maybe a Veyron of some sort that would be out there for me, but maybe I'll do one of those. I don't know. I mean, I won't be offended. I won't feel like I didn't live up to the standard if I don't get them either.
Fair enough. Do you think Jay Leno's the only one who enjoys owning his F1? He's the only F1 owner who actually enjoys using it on Earth?
There are a handful of them that get driven. A lot of them have gotten crashed.
Really?
Oh yeah. We had a story from one of BMW's employees that was past his NDA that talked about how BMW crashed Ralph Lauren's road car. And in researching that, I found a story of how they crashed his LM as well.
Oh, no.
And so, Mr. Bean's car was crashed twice. I looked into the car that Elon Musk crashed, and then that car later caught fire. There's a lot of them with stories, which is great for me. But the delta of a story car is still a lot, and a lot more than I have. So I don't know, maybe one day that'll intersect. But until then, there's just so many great cars with great stories. Like, I wasn't out looking for an SLR, but if they're going to sell me Paris Hiltons, you better believe I'm going to have it. Because I mean,
that's such a
that sort of thing.
I don't know if we're gonna be able to top that story, especially when you did the picture recreation. I think that might be it as far as famous cars. It was so cool. And last question, Ed, do you every day wake up considering doing Cannonball again, try to get it back?
Never. Nope. I think of all the things that I have been able to chase, the catharsis of actually achieving the Cannonball record. So, I mean, I set that goal 10 years prior and was able to do it. And it was everything I ever wanted it to be, because I didn't want it to be anything other than the chance to maybe have one article to frame on the office wall. And it became so much more than that, which was a blessing and an amazing set of opportunities. But I did it for me. And I mean, standing there looking out over the darkness into the Pacific Ocean, it was it. Like, it was everything. And now I love going on a long road trip, and I'm going to try to do it in a 100 horsepower car later this year, probably. But so that I will continue to do it. But having the record again doesn't mean anything to me. It meant a lot to be able to have it at one point. It meant a lot to be in the presence of these guys who I admired so much, and to be listed amongst their names, and to be able to hopefully contribute to their legacies as adding something to it. And so I've gotten infinitely more out of that pursuit than I ever dreamt of or ever needed in order for it to be worth it. And so no, I don't, no part of me ever thought about really going out and trying to set the outright record again. I mean, we broke down trying to run the darn ambulance across this year, but that didn't, Pennsylvania's lovely.
Yeah. Ed, I just want to say thank you so much. It really was an honor. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
My pleasure. So what are you trying to get the audience to buy into? What do you want to teach them every time you have a guest on?
Every time I have somebody on, I want to teach them that everybody has an interesting story to tell, whether you have a following or whether you don't.
Fair enough. And is your goal to prescribe how they grow that following so that their stories can have more legs, or what's the thought process there?
I think in the best way is to show that it's a little cliche, but that anybody can just start it and do it. You don't need a studio. I'm in my mom's office. You don't need a studio. I'm using the basic mic or whatever, and that at any time somebody has started with nothing. I mean, nothing spawns into into a full-blown production. Everything starts from zero, from $0. And so as I'm doing with this, every single guest has reflected that you've started with a hobby that grew into something into college, and now you're the host of one of the coolest freaking talk show or car shows on YouTube. And that's the point, is that it all starts with zero and expands.
Fair. Yeah, we certainly did. I had never edited a video in my life, and a friend of mine helped us with the first 25 videos that we released for VINwiki, and then kind of realized that the writing on the wall was that this was going to become somebody's full-time job, and he ran pretty hard away. And I don't blame him for that, because it was a long, long time till we made any money with it. But fortunately, it immediately resulted in growth in our app, because it was evangelizing that concept. And so had it not been for that, it would never have made sense to push as hard as I did in order to just keep producing content with the regularity that we have. But it's, fortunately it did work, and it's grown. And I will say that it's not always available. And I had no idea going into that. But the way that social media algorithms work, and the way that they serve content to the audience that they have, it varies in terms of how likely it is for a new content creator to gain attention. And I think that's something that you can really learn, and it may mean that you change the pacing at which you release a new content strategy. So like, if I was looking to gain attention on YouTube, I would say do it right now and start 45 days ago, because every established YouTuber is getting about a third or half as many views as they're used to, because right now in Q3, we're trying to serve as much new content to people so they can build new subscriptions and get new interest and things like that. And then into Q4, you'll see a lot of that to be a lot harder, because you're going to see a lot more content from more established creators that know to, build their best stuff towards the end of the year and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of lessons to be learned in terms of how we approach the business of content creation that can really be useful to those that want to start something new.
Well, I really appreciate the advice. Truly, I do, especially coming from somebody who has a lot of experience. And as you said, I thought it was really cool that you mentioned that who you collaborate with can determine a lot, and collaboration can mean a lot more than content. So, I'm trying to get more people like you, as I said, as a total shot in the dark with everybody who I've gotten. I've shot a DM. There's a lot of unread and read DMs out there with people, but hopefully releasing these more frequently, I can get somebody else who maybe even volunteers to be on. Let's see.
There you go. Well, thanks so much for having me. Good luck with the growth, and watch Car Trek, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ed.
Have a great night.